This is my really good friend Louisa. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in our world right now. You know, maybe we should talk about years ago when we were kids and our folks are faced with different things.
We lived in a whole different time.
We did.
I don't think we had to deal with the media like we're dealing with now. And the social media that our families are dealing with in this day and age is completely different than what I grew up with. And I know our parents had issues to deal with when we were growing up. But the thing was, not everybody knew about it. They dealt with it in their own little world.
Exactly. The world that we're kind of being forced into right now, that closed unit business that
Exactly.
our kids and our grandkids are insisting upon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay positive about it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to get hyped over it.
Yeah.
And washing my hands a lot.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm not running to buy toilet tissue.
Thank goodness I had plenty of it.
My parents did without a lot. And my grandparents did without a lot. They got by. I remember my dad, even as he got to be a little more prosperous, and I don't think any farmer in his day and age got to be too prosperous, but he wouldn't go and buy something right away. He would try to repair or get by.
Right. Yep.
And I learned that lesson.
So, Louisa, I know your parents and probably a lot of your family, and my parents and their family went through the Depression. Did they ever speak about it?
Well, I think my dad spoke about it because my dad was quite a bit older than my mother. And so he was living at home yet when the Depression was going on. And my dad came from 13 children, told about his mother, my grandma, going and bartering with people for food, for chickens and meat. And
What did she barter?
well, she had a big garden, so she would trade off potatoes or vegetables or whatever for the farmers for meat and milk, and then they would make, my grandma made homemade butter. That was how they got through the Depression, feeding a big family. Plus all the boys, my dad had several brothers, and they all were living at home, so they all worked and contributed to that household because my grandpa was dead. And so my grandma was raising those children on her own. You know, we don't have a clue how tough they had it.
No.
You know, we are living in the lap of luxury compared to what our grandparents lived in, or even my parents. But I don't want our younger generation to think that everybody has always had this wonderful lifestyle, and to be compassionate to that.
My husband and I had nothing, you know, nothing when we were married. We were married young and we didn't have anything.
So did we.
So I'm afraid these young couples are killing themselves trying to attain it all.
I know.
And
But they don't know any different,
Right.
because their life has been that way. And that is the way our kids are growing up nowadays. And we're as much to fault of that as anything, because we have wanted better for our children. And they're no different than we are. They want better for their children.
Yeah, that's true.
But where does it end?
I know.
I don't want my children and my grandchildren to forget to be kind and compassionate to people that don't have, because there's still a lot of people that don't have.
Well, my folks went through it, of course, the Depression I'm talking about, but they didn't talk to me about it, but it was a lifestyle that they had. They didn't have to tell me. You knew when you get to a certain age, you knew that, you know, you'd read about the Depression, you knew your folks went through the Depression, and it affected their way of thinking. The one thing Mom would tell me was that my grandmother had a huge garden, and she was a wonderful cook, and that living on a farm, you had food at least. You didn't have any money to spend on anything, and probably like your mom, maybe. I think, you know, I do. I think Grandma sold her eggs, you know, for flour and whatever.
Absolutely.
A lot of the women had chickens, and they sold those eggs.
And their chickens.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And their geese.
Yes.
And their ducks.
Yes. They did probably better than maybe a lot of people in the country, because again, they lived on a farm and they had the food that they needed to eat. So
we were all in the same boat. None of us had money, and none of our friends or our neighbors had money, so we were all in the same boat. We didn't know we were poor.
No, and they didn't either. You know, Grandma was a fabulous seamstress. With Grandma, she took seamstress school in Denmark, and so she was like a professional. So when she came over, the girls would look in a catalog and point out a dress, and she would take newspaper and cut out a pattern for it, and then she'd sew it up for them.
What a gift.
Gorgeous.
What a gift.
She was a Renaissance woman. She just knew how to do everything. I've seen pictures, like on Facebook, the reminiscing type things. They show pictures of their mothers or their grandmothers with feed sack dresses, and they were pretty.
And they made aprons, and I know my mother made curtains. They made good use of that.
I know it was good advertising for these feed companies to do this, but at the same time, they could have used any kind of material or whatever to hold that feed, but they chose this for the women and the children, and I think that was wonderful. Our people got through the Depression with saving and not wasting, and doing what they could to feed their families and feed themselves, and it passed. But then after a while, World War II loomed its ugly head.
I think that people, unless they had somebody that was in the service at that time, which almost every family did, I don't think they made a big deal out of it because they had to live through it. You know what I mean?
I do, yes.
When you're going through it, you kind of just
go through it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know my dad was gone for 4.5 years. He was in Japan when I was born. And my Uncle Carl was somewhere in Italy, got wounded with shrapnel. My Uncle Harold, somewhere in France. They all came home. Carl had a bit of trouble with that shrapnel wound probably the rest of his life. He ended up using a cane when he was quite young.
Right.
But they came back, and there's so many thousands and thousands that didn't come back. And we have to remember those people that gave their lives for this. All of these young men and women have given their lives and done what they felt their duty for their country. And sometimes it seems like...
You feel like they're unappreciated.
Very much so. How do you think that our parents and grandparents would have dealt with the coronavirus?
Well, I think they would have dealt with it the same way they dealt with things in their day and age. I don't think they got hyped up over everything like we do, because they don't have the social media.
No.
And they don't have the news going 24/7, telling you how bad it is all over the country.
Yeah.
And every little thing that happens is on the news.
Have you gotten frightened yet?
No.
Concerned?
Well, I'm concerned. I don't think I'm overly concerned.
I have lung trouble, because of asthma. And I have a little bit of heart trouble.
Yes.
And I think, oh my goodness.
Yes.
That concerned me.
Absolutely.
A little bit more maybe than other people.
And rightly so.
And I'm old. I'm getting old.
Well, we're both old.
Exactly.
You're not as old as I am.
Doesn't matter.
But you know what? I'm not going to worry about it.
Okay.
I have no control over it.
Things come into this world. It's a fallen world. And bad things happen. That we are both getting older, and we are. And instead of our moms and our dads and our uncles and aunts passing away, which is natural and normal, now our friends are beginning to do that too, and our peers.
Our friends, our family, our husbands. In the last 3 years, I've lost a husband and a sister. It's an adjustment.
It really is.
It's a mind adjustment.
I was going to say that. It's a mindset. We have to really actually seriously think about this. It isn't going to go on forever. So where are we right now, with our life? And I guess for me, I'm just trying to enjoy each day that God gives me and do the best I can with it. Try to love on anybody He brings into my
That's
path.
my mindset right now, to enjoy each day and don't get depressed over losing people.
Right.
Because at the age that I am, that's going to happen more and more and more. Trying very hard to mentally prepare myself.
Boy, that's a hard one to mentally
It
prepare
is.
yourself.
It is hard to
How do
mentally.
you go about that? You just
Well, I try very hard to have an attitude of gratitude, to enjoy each person, and to try not to be judgmental. You know, it's pretty easy to do that. And as you get older and you get set in your ways, you tend to think you're the only one that knows anything and you're smarter than everybody else. And I'm not. And I know that. But I pray every day. I think that helps.
Well, for me, you know, I turned 74 this last fall, and it just occurred to me I'm getting to be old. Duh!
Well, I just
You're
turned 80 this
You're
year.
getting to be an older lady there, Melanie.
Yeah.
So
And
what are
you
you
know
going to do with that?
We're lucky.
Yes.
We're lucky we got to be this old.
Yes, yes, yes.
Not everybody does.
Yeah, the health business. Anybody can say, I'm doing wonderful at 104 if
Yes.
they're really healthy.
Yes.
And they got their mind.
We have so little control over that, too. You know, I've really been blessed with good health, and I don't take it for granted either. And I'll tell you, I probably do not eat as properly as I should.
Processed foods.
I'm trying really careful not to do that, but I still like them all.
Well, I do too.
And I try to eat as many jelly beans as I possibly can in my life. And I like my coffee by the gallons. And I drink a fair amount of wine because I think it's very healthy for you. And even if it isn't, I still like it. But I do think that my parents ate much healthier than I do. There are certain things that shouldn't change in our lives. I mean, we should always treat people respectfully. We should not lie to each other. We shouldn't cheat people. We should worship God. We should take care of our fellow man. We should be kind. I mean, those things are all basic things that shouldn't change, but they have. And I look at my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, and I live long enough to give them a little guidance if they ever ask me.
Well, that's it. Well, even if they don't, just write a list. Say, oh, by the way,
list. Try not to give too much advice, because they really don't want my advice. I do think that kids do learn from their parents.
Oh, yes.
By how they treat people and how they do business. And
So what did we learn from our parents?
well, I think we learned everything. Certainly we learn more as we grow along in our aging process, because we come in contact with so many different people. And I know I have met so many different people, and I know you have too. You're much more world-traveled than I am. Every person that I have come in contact with, I have learned something from. Maybe not wonderful, but I've learned something. And I try to keep my mind open to that. I don't know about you, but I have found over the years with dealing with people, you meet somebody and you have a definite impression of that person on your first meeting. And this has happened to me more than once, so that's why I try to keep my mind open. I'll meet that person and I think, I don't know if I think that's somebody I'm going to be friends with. And as time goes on and you spend more time with that person and you get to know that person, all of a sudden you think, you know what? I really like that person. And I'm glad that I didn't close my mind off to that.
Right. And that can't judge a book by its cover.
No.
Yeah. From Dad, he had this absolute unconditional love for his family. I always say I could have said, Dad, you want to go to the dump? And he'd been right there. It doesn't matter what I was doing or where I was going to go. He always wanted to be with. My mom, I learned strength. My mom was she was a warrior, especially during my polio years. But my whole life, I mean, she was my advocate, let me tell you. My mom, she was quite a lady. She had a knock your socks off sense of humor. And so I was brought up in a
Very loving
home of laughter.
environment.
Yeah, and
Loving environment.
Yeah, and a home of laughter. She was strong though. And she was just there for me.
My mom was a strong person too. My dad was a typical Scandinavian man of his era, you know. I loved my wife so much I almost told her.
Right, yeah.
You know.
I have, thanks to the Lord, deep faith in him. And a lot of it was the church I was brought up in. My grandparents and my folks were founding members, or whatever you want to call it. And my mom and my aunts were all Sunday school teachers. But it was my aunt sitting there when I'd run in the house and say, Elma, Elma, and she'd be sitting there reading her Bible quietly. It was those moments. So, disasters come and go, huge things like wars, epidemics like polio, death in families and friendships, and that's part of life. And now with the coronavirus, we have to come to the point where we don't run scared, I think, and that we just do, like Louisa said earlier, the things that are necessary for us to stay safe and keep other people safe. That's a big thing too, to keep other people safe, and use some common sense in all that we do. And I guess we just have to wait, you know, pray about it and wait.
I think we should be vigilant in the fact that we should pay attention and not do stupid things.
Right. We think about all the families that have lost family members to this terrible pandemic, is what they're calling it. Just God bless those families, and just pray that the Lord will help you have strength and peace of mind and somehow get through this. It's a terrible thing to happen to a family. So we just pray that this will be over soon and that we can all go on about our life. Thank you, Louisa, for being here with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's always good to be with you.
Thank you. Same here.
The world could fall down, it's gonna be okay.